Welcome to Breaking 70, Race Against Father Time, Chasing Dreams and Defying Time with Brian Bailey. Okay, Breaking 70 members and GolfCask members, this is Brian Bailey here, bringing you our new episode, episode 5. As for my injury, this has put a wrinkle in a lot of what we're doing this year. As of right now, I had planned on being shooting film and starting to bring those coaches to you, but I hurt my back in January. It's been 7 weeks now, or 6 weeks now. It's getting better. Started PT. They told me to go out and see what I can do. I tried to swing a golf club the other day, and that was not working. So I'm probably another 4 weeks, give or take, away from being able to do a lot of the stuff I plan to do up till this point. So what I'm going to do and kind of what I've structured is February is going to be putting month. March will be short game month, and those are the two areas inside of instruction that I do the most. So I'm going to do some really cool videos on how to be a better putter and a better short game player. And then hopefully by April, we'll have our coaches in and starting to give lessons with the goal of breaking 70. I haven't played in forever, since December, and itching to get back out there, but needless to say, I'm not ready to do it as of yet. So last episode, we talked about putter setup, right? What does this setup look like? So the really cool thing, if you think about it, to break 70, if that's our goal, where we really have to be good is giving ourselves enough opportunities on the putting green, getting enough shots inside of 20 feet so we can convert for birdie. But the really, really big piece, which I think is fascinating, if you really want to elevate and become a par or better player, your putting has to be under 30 strokes per round, and then your scrambling has to be 50% or better. So by hitting more greens and hitting more shots inside of 20 feet, your chances of offense go way up, making birdie. And that also reduces defense, because when you hit more greens and you hit them closer, you won't three putt. And anytime that you miss the green, again, if you're some of the best players in the world, you're looking at 50-60% up and down rates. That means 40-50% of the time you're not getting up and down. So that is a huge key. So I always say for collegians that are trying to go professional, what is the biggest difference between them and touring professionals? One is just not knowing how to be a touring professional is number one. Number two, and probably the most important part, is their scoring around the green is nowhere near good enough to compete with those that play week in, week out on the television. So as a high-end player, if you really want to learn to start to separate yourself from the masses, it's your ability to scramble and it's your ability to putt better. So we talked setup last time, so we talked kind of a very basic setup component. I'm going to release another video next week showing you some of the common fails that you'll see with setup and what we're going to talk about today with grip and how that influences a lot of things that break. So today we're going to talk mainly about grip types. So again, we're going to go very high level, right? We're going to talk about basically the four main types of grips when people grab a putter and pros and cons of each. And then once we kind of own that, so now we have good setup, now we have a good connection with the golf club, now we can start talking about moving the club in space. So that'll be, like I said, next week's adventure. And I think this is kind of fun. I've been coaching putting now for 20 plus years, taught thousands upon thousands of students. I've never really sat down and kind of walked through what I would do if someone came to me and said, Brian Bailey, teach me how to be a putting coach. I've never really done that. Or somebody came to me and said, I've never putted in my entire life. Give me the next year and pour into me as much as you can inside of short game and putting. How would I lay that out? What would it kind of look like as we move forward? So here's kind of what we're going to talk about. So with the grip, you got to remember the grip is your connection to the golf club. So when we set up our system, and by our system I'm saying our body, right? We're setting up the engine, the motor, whatever you want to call it, the system. Once we've set it up, now, so we've put our body in space to hopefully deliver the club, or allow the body to move to deliver the club reasonably predictable. But the big piece now is, now we've got to put our hands on the club, right? So putting is easy and hard all at the same time. So when we actually select a club and we put our hands on it, how we orientate our hands, lead hand, or for a right-handed putter, your left hand, trail hand or bottom hand if you're in conventional grip, how you place that on there is really, really important. But it's more so how you put it on, but also with the pressure you put it on. So how do I grip it? How tight? How loose? Where do I put it in my hand? All these are huge factors in actually interacting with the club. So most people don't even think about it. Most people grab a putter, they put their hands on it, what have you. That works for breaking 90. Could be working for breaking 80. But again, when we start getting better and better, we can only do so much with ball striking. So there has to be a component where the putting really takes off. And what you really start to see is where the touring players do much better than the average collegian is they make roughly 10% more putts at 10 to 20, kind of 9 to 20 feet. And they convert at a higher rate, not nearly as high, not a 10% margin, but they definitely convert at a much higher rate than your kind of average really good amateur. So what they've done is they've maximized their putting stroke as much as possible. So what we want to start to do is get rid of any conflicts or any issues with grip and setup that is going to influence how the putter moves in space. And that's probably the chicken and egg point, right? So is the way that I'm gripping the club forcing rotations, or am I just rotating due to setup? Or am I just rotating? So all these pieces, what I've got to start to figure out is if I can start to create these pieces systematically, kind of stack them on top of each other and kind of neutralize everything out, I have a really good chance of creating a relatively repeatable high-end putting stroke. Most people don't ever give it that much thought. They go to the Dick's Sporting Goods, they go to the PGA Tour, they put on a mat, they grab a club, they love it, it's a big name, it's Scotty, it's Ping, it's this and that. I love it, boom, that's how they fit their putter. How do they grip the putter? I don't know, this is comfortable, this is what I've been doing since I've been playing. Well, how long you been playing? 10 years, how's your putting? Sucks. Maybe that's a piece. So again, it's just kind of understanding that. So when we grip a club, we need to think of lead hand and trail hand. Ideally, past conventional thought was lead hand or left hand is face, right hand is power. It's not true. Both hands, think of both hands as a clamp or a different vice, right? Being able to lock onto the club. How I lock each hand on the club will influence how this putter face moves. So if I rotate my hand way over the top, but my natural wrist position is this, it's naturally going to try to get back to that wrist position unless I do something to kind of lock that out. Same thing with the trail hand. The trail hand is if it's in a way under or way over position, again, it's going to try to find neutral. And that's why we said guns down, arms hanging there. That is a good neutral position to start with. Now we might need to rotate slightly here or there every once in a while, but that is kind of next level putting, right? So the other really funny part of this is most people say inside of putting it's a big motion, right? Most people get confused, they do kind of a shoulder rock. No, it's actually a rotation of the chest. That doesn't, but the hands and arms and all that is still active. It just, ideally we want to reduce the amount. So our hands and arms and everything is working kind of in conjunction with the chest. The chest is just not doing it on its own. You can go look at any of the 6 degrees of freedom motion. Nobody locks everything out completely. There's always some sort of movement going on. So the other tricky part of putting is as I'm pulling the putter back and through, if I'm not moving the body correctly, which a lot of times most people aren't, then we're going to start to play arms and hand speed games. So if you think about it, if I got 2 separate clasps or vices on the side of a putter, if the lead side pulls faster, the right hand's going to train, but we're going to change wrist conditions. Because as I pull, this hand's not going at the same speed, so that's going to change wrist condition, which changes the face conditions. And vice versa, if for some reason the lead side slows down and the right side's pushing at a faster speed, that's where people say I got a handsy putter stroke, right? So everything slows down, there's a stall, and the right hand throws the club. So again, it kind of throws the club forward. That's when a lot of people go, I got a handsy putting stroke. You don't. What you do is you have a system that's not working correctly. And that's where the big super stroke grips really came from, is if you look at this grip, they call it a pistola, which means it comes up and it flares out at the tip. So what that really means is when I grip the club, it's really designed, that fat-ended piece is to kind of sit in my lifeline of my hand. That's how the grip is actually designed, right? So as a club sits like that, it's okay to allow a little bit of rotation, maybe to allow what some people might construe as a handsy putting stroke. Where the super stroker is not made to sit in here, so what I have to do is, because the grip is bigger, I actually have to kind of flex the wrist. I don't want to go into too much detail here. You have to flex the wrist, and what that does is it actually takes away rotation because of the way I have to grip the putter. So actually how super stroker grips work is, if I'm a handsy putter, it changes the orientation of the hands, which will limit rotation, which could be beneficial for some, but too many people think that's the answer. No, that's a symptom. But that's how that grip works. So what we want to be able to do is understand when I grip the club, when I put both vices or clamps on each side of the club, how they work. They need to work in unison. So I can't have hands moving faster or slower. I can't have different rotations, which we'll talk about, because again, if anything is out of balance inside the putting stroke, then the actual club head is affected. And if the club head's affected, now we're losing loft, changing loft conditions, changing face conditions, changing angle of attack condition. We're changing all these different conditions, which makes putting very, very challenging. Putting should be simple, but I would again say it's probably the hardest thing in golf to do. So what are the main types of grips? We're gonna go over here inside the putting, on the putting board here in a minute. We'll kind of go through all the different ones. But we have conventional, which would be lead hand, or for a right-handed golfer like me, left hand high, right hand low, and some orientation. We have cross-handed, which is lead side low, left hand low. We would have pencil, some variation of, however they like to put the trail hand, because the trail hand can work this way, the wrist can work this way and this way. That's it, right? If it rotates, that is actually from the forearms or from the shoulder joint. So a lot of people go this way, that way they do not have this throw out. But you can still have lots and lots of conditions that can change the club head if you don't understand even going pencil or going a claw grip. But again, these are grips that are very popular. And there's one UK-based instructor that basically puts everybody inside of the claw because he says the numbers are better. My question is the numbers better or their performance better? Anyways, so again, these are all good ways of being able to kind of set up to the golf club by grips. And each have positives and negatives to them, and we'll talk about those here in a second. So again, what I want you to reiterate is, so what's really important after we get a good setup, our orientation to this club is really, really important, right? Because that is our connection, which is our hands, how we connect to the club. Now, we'll talk setup too. In the future, we'll talk about kind of heel toe, lean, shaft back. Those are all conditions that we can work on. But again, we want to set up a system, setup, grip, club, all relatively neutral. Because if we can get everything relatively neutral, then we should be able to come up with a pattern to move the body relatively easy and make very, very consistent strokes. And if we can make very consistent strokes, moving within certain parameters, we roll the ball really well. And then we go attack the big umbrella of read, speed, start line, and life is great. But if we don't have the mechanical pieces for read, speed, start line, we're kind of in trouble, right? So this is kind of the way I'm angling back. Again, if I had a instructor come to me and say, hey, make me the best putting coach you could make me. Here's the things I've learned over the last 25 years. So without further ado, let's go over to the putting green or on the putting board. Let's talk about the different setups, not the different setups, I'm sorry, the different actual grips inside the putter, and talk about how they have pros and cons and what some equipment pieces that will actually benefit that type of setup and grip. Because again, equipment is a huge piece. We're not going into super detail right now about it, but again, as we're peeling back the layers, as we're trying to get better and better and better, when we start getting in the 70s, we want to make sure that this tool is designed for what you do. You don't want the putter working against you. And too often people have the putter working against you, and worst case, a lot of times players have bad beliefs or a misunderstanding of what's happening and think a putter is actually helping them, but it's actually a curse and is actually prohibiting them from being a better player. So without further ado, I'll see you on the putting board. All right, GolfCast members, Brian Bailey here. We're going to talk about the different grip styles. So if you think about it, we have a setup, right? We want to get a good setup position, arms hang down. We want to be in a good setup position. Once we have a good setup position, now the importance of grabbing our grip. Ideally, we want the face, the grip with setup should allow us to place the club behind the ball and point it to our target. And ideally, the grip is going to allow us at our putting stroke to be able to get the face square to the ball at impact. So when we actually take our grip, some of the conventional ways of taking a grip. Lead hand on top, trail hand under, what we call conventional. Now you can overlap, double overlap, interlock, baseball grip. There's a lot of variations of. I actually, when I used to do conventional grip, I actually would double interlock. So I would go pinky and ring finger, and that brings my hands a little closer together. But again, and then what you also see is because my right hand is a little bit lower, my trail shoulder will be a little lower, so I'll have a little tilt to my body, which is fine. Understand that's a rise angle condition. We can set up for that in the future and talk about that. So that would be conventional. Now the dangers of conventional, or where you see most people go wrong with a conventional grip, is if the body does not move correctly, the right hand might release, thus shutting the face down and gives you the pulls. Fine. So a lot of people that are right hand driven, so a right hander, your best play is with your right hand. So a lot of people you'll start to see, if their putting stroke conventional usually breaks down, they usually blame the right hand. So sometimes with conventional they can pull a lot, but more so what you see is it's more of a trail hand driven stroke. Cross-handed, the exact opposite. You take your lead hand goes low, your right hand goes on top. So again, you can mask this however you want, what's comfortable. But what we see is lead hand low, right hand high. And immediately what you'll see is my shoulders will get actually relatively flat. So it neutralizes any side tilts, which is really nice. The danger I see a lot of times with cross-handed grips is they actually get negative. They get tilt going forward because their left hand's low, and that's going to cause the putter to be working too far down. So then they're going to have to change the radius somehow by lifting, by doing something in the elbows. So a lot of times, again, if you're going cross-handed, and it is purely lead driven, right? We're taking away the responsibility of pretty much the entire putting stroke out of the right side. Right side is much more passive in what it does. So this becomes a more lead side stroke, so we tend to pull away from the body a lot of times. We tend to have a kind of a pushy path because as our lead side extends, the face is gonna open, add loft, and kind of be pushed out. But again, cross-handed is really good for people that actually kind of throw the trail hand. And also the difficulty with lead side is when we get at really long distances, it's hard to create enough speed with a pull, right? Think about it this way. Is it easier to pull somebody forward, or is it easier for someone to push them forward, right? So a lot of times when we pull, now pull allows us to put everything in line easier compared to a push, but it's hard to generate as much power. So if that kind of gives you an idea. So think about it, if you had a rope and you pulled, right? If you had a person at the end of the rope, just body weight, and I just pull them forward, they're gonna fall in line with that straight line of the pull and be moved forward, but it's not nearly as powerful as me coming up behind them and just pushing them and not really caring where they're going. So just think of that. So cross-handed kind of changes that attitude. Then we have pencil, we have claw, there's hundreds of variations of, right? And the main person we're doing this is, the person that comes kind of this side is they don't want this action at all. So they put the hand here. They can use the trail side, the torso and all that for a power source, but it limits what the right hand can do. It can be very effective for some people. Claw is the same thing. So they kind of get this weird group of hands, and it just puts their wrist condition where they shouldn't throw it as much. Don't care. Play with it. If you like one or the other, so be it. And then the final one is kind of the newer version where the hands are actually kind of equal with each other. So you grip with one hand, the right hand kind of comes in, lays over the top. The thumbs are basically parallel, maybe just a little bit lower on the right side, but this is kind of the newer, neutral, even-handed grip. So again, we go conventional, cross, pencil, claw, kind of neutral, right? So what you really need to do, and I would play around with this as a chance, is go out to the putting green or inside your house, lay it down, some sort of putting board, sit on a rug, and just play with the different grips and see if you can start to see a difference. If I like the way that this one feels. Some people, when they go away from conventional, hate it because they lose track of what their right hand's doing. Maybe they hate cross-handed for that reason. Maybe people love to go cross-handed because they want to do everything with the lead side. But you don't know until you test and you play with it. But you have to understand inside, if we get a basic setup that's really good, starting to change these hand positions slightly is an effective way to start playing around with what you would enjoy, or maybe to be able to roll the ball better. And then again, ideally we want our hands clamped on either side. We don't want over or under. with lead hand, trail hands, because again, that causes different rotations. We'll talk about that in future videos. So ideally, again, if we go our new grip, right, we go set up, bend the knees, stick the butt out, bend forward, arms hang, pray, guns here. Some sort of setup where both hands are on equal side of the club moves things better. And then again, as we get into this more, we're going to talk about what happens when the lead side runs faster, trail side moves slower or faster, if we start getting some tilts, if we allow certain joints to do different things, how that influences the putter head. But before we get there, we got to be able to set up to it and we got to be able to grip it. So play around with a bunch of different grips, kind of start to move it in space, see what you like inside of your setup, and then we'll talk movements in future videos. So I hope this was helpful in understanding what the different grips are. Now we've gone setup, now we've gone grip. Let's move it next time.